Hey guys, in this series, Go Concepts in Joseki, I'm going to use Go concepts, metaphors, and so forth to explain Joseki moves properly so you can stop memorizing and just understand them. These concepts can guide you through even the most novel of situations. So let's get started. So we have a really basic Joseki here. This may be one of the first Joseki many players learn, but it's also really common in higher level games. And it's a perfect example of some of the concepts I want to go over. And I haven't seen a lot of people explain this properly in full detail, so let's take it back. We start with the 4-4 point, and white approaches, and black plays the one space low pincer. The most common move here, even to this day, is to invade in the 3-3 point. So the idea here is to get some points in the corner, and white doesn't mind the fact that black can cut white off from the other stone. So now that black has cut white off, white needs to, first of all, increase the eye space in the corner, but also increase the liberties of this stone because there's only 3 liberties left. And so let's say white tries to go faster like this. It's going to be a problem with all these cuts and ataris. So for both eye space and liberties, white's going to push. And there's no reason to play on the second line right now. You want more points, not less points. So now black will extend. We can go over after what happens if black tries to hane, but let's end for now. Basically, with this white stone over here, it makes it all the more dangerous for this cut here. So black extends. And now this is the point I really wanted to talk about the most, this moment. So in Go, we have a concept of staying ahead of your opponent. And on top of that, you also want to get out as much as you can. And by that, I mean out like this rather than being sealed in. So let's say white tries to play this. Now, what do you think is the problem here? Feel free to pause the video and think about this. So I'll give you a second. So basically, the problem is that if black pushes now, white's liberties on these 3 groups here, these 3 sets of stones, are shrinking. So 3 liberties on this stone, 3 liberties on this stone, and 3 on these 2 here. So the problem now is that if black cuts, let's say here, this is actually the correct side. So usually in these situations, when there's like a push in and cut, usually whichever side gets cut is the side that's going to be captured. So in other words, the first cut is the bait. So like if black cuts here, white would usually capture like this, and white would be sacrificing the corner in this case, and vice versa. So black usually cuts here, and if black sacrifices like this, black can ladder, but even without the ladder, this is going to be much better for black because black has the outside, and it's difficult for white to fight around here, and the corner is very small. Plus, this move is going to be sente. By the way, give it some thought why this move is sente and what would happen if white ignores, because that's actually a bit of a Go problem in and of itself. Now, so basically white can't jump here yet. White wants to get ahead. White wants to stay on the 3rd line, and white wants to get as many points as possible, but white would get cut. So you might think, why doesn't white just keep crawling? Well, white can, and this would be almost okay, but this misses a chance to get a better result. So this is basically not making use of this other white stone here. So this is basically what might happen if this white stone wasn't here at all. But because this white stone is here, white should expect a better result, and there is a way. So this black hane is an example of black being ahead of white and taking advantage of that. So if it was white's turn instead, then white would get to play here. Black would be running out of liberties. This white stone would be becoming more and more relevant as a threat on black. And white would be getting a lot of points and being very much on the outside. So it's a really, really huge difference when white plays the hane versus black playing the hane. And this is a perfect example of why you want to stay ahead of the opponent. So And just to take it back for a second, so other examples of being ahead would be like, let's say, some of you guys, many of you guys probably have had those experiences where you're having these running battles, like when the board's more filled up than this, but you have two groups that keep running, jumping into the center. It's because in many situations, especially if these are both weak groups, then if one side stops jumping out and just tries to play something else, the other side gets a chance to basically like wrap around the enemy group and gains a lot of leverage and also putting pressure, especially if there's some more black stones over here. So this white would be in danger, and black would be not only getting a lot stronger, but also gaining a lot of influence and therefore potential territory as well. So, you know, if you just look at that and you look at the other way where like it was white doing it, this is just such a paramount difference that usually you can't let this happen. But of course it depends on what's actually happening in the game. Another example of being ahead of the opponent would be in those situations where you have stones against each other like this. You may have heard proverbs such as hane the head of 2 or 3 stones blindly. And that refers to this kind of move. So these are 2 white stones and black is haneing on the head. And this hane move is what I would also refer to sometimes as like wrapping around, as I said earlier. So black's basically gaining leverage over this white group and really kind of dominating it. And white can't even really play here safely because there's this cut to worry about. And even if white could play there, it's not even necessarily that great either. Maybe black plays double hane. So white probably has to play here, and then again, black can make another threat, and white would have to play some kind of fix for this cut. And black would get the next move, so black would be gaining a lot of advantage in sente. Not to mention, in this case, there's another forcing move here. So, you know, again, if you compare the opposite where white gets to do all that, it's a really huge total swing between the two versions. So that's kind of the advantage of being ahead of your opponent. Another example would be like if white is already ahead like this and white gets to play this type of move. Really, really good for the offensive effect on these black stones as well as the influence toward the center. So now let's go back to the Joseki. And I'm going to expand on this a little more. So white really wants to play here because we know that this crawl here was not acceptable. So if you know this 3-3 invasion sequence, for example, which doesn't use an approach move, just invading cold turkey, then black picks aside the block on and white crawls, and we typically get, especially, you know, a few years back, get a situation like this. There's a few different variations, and especially with recent AI, you know, changing the meta, there's some different things that can happen like this. But yeah, just as an example, because it doesn't really matter. This is something white might expect from jumping into the corner without an approach move. But when you have an approach move and black, instead of defending the corner in some way, like maybe kicking here or playing this knight's move, black is choosing to emphasize the right side. So by doing so, black is basically making a compromise or a sacrifice in terms of the corner and emphasizing the importance of having a position on the right side. So white plays in the corner, and black, since black is valuing the right side, black needs to actually take the right side by first cutting white's stone off. So white plays this push and black extends. So white could play this knight's move, which does get ahead of black, you could say, and also gets out and helps the eye space. But this is really low, so it has like fewer points than white can normally get by staying on the third line. And plus, black can do various things like just pressing down, or more likely, well, this move would get a bit complicated because it is related to some complicated stuff in the corner. But essentially white is pressed down low. He's pretty much pressing himself down here. So this is not what white wants if they can help it. And again, the normal 3-3 invasion has a variation like this. This is actually perfectly acceptable for both sides. So that makes it a little bad for white when white actually had this advantage of the friend over here, the approach move. So white can use this stone and do better than this. So we want to play this move. This is like absolutely the best move we can hope for because it's out, it's on the third line and therefore getting the most points, and it's ahead of black. But we can't, again, because of the push and cut. So well, we need to increase liberties, right? Because this didn't work because of white's liberty shortage. So we have a way to increase liberties. We can increase liberties with these exchanges. That's actually what these are for. Now you know. So now white has 6 liberties with this group. And now when white jumps out like this, there's actually no problem. So if black pushes and cuts, don't get tricked this time into capturing this. Because again, black would succeed here. And this would be quite bad for white given how much of the outside black has. And this corner is only 7 points plus a capture. And black wouldn't even need the ladder again. This would be enough as well for black. But in this case, you don't have to capture on that side. You could just connect here. And even if black plays here, you just capture like this. So the push and cut doesn't work at all for black. And this is the end of the Joseki as we saw at the start of the video. This is actually considered locally a little bit better for white because white gets a really nice corner, not to mention the corner that started off as black's. And black gets a fairly narrow, strong but narrow wall formation with a extension that's quite close by. But this can be fine for black depending on the whole board because black pincered here in the first place, at least in this case, because we said that black wanted the right side. So that's often the reason you would pincer, is because that side that you're playing the pincer on is more important to you than the corner or the adjacent side. So in terms of the whole board, black may be gaining a lot of advantage here. So, you know, often this could be fine for black, maybe even better for black sometimes. But locally, it's good for white. Now, there's something I really want to explain though, because this is just completely glossed over most of the time and nobody really explains this. These exchanges are not exchanges white would like to make if white didn't have to. So these are actually, like as it stands, until we factor in getting to jump here, these are actually bad for white. And let me explain that. So white increases the size of the corner a little bit, not very much, just a few little points here, right? And you could say that white decreases black's area, but this wasn't even black's area before. In fact, if we just imagine for a second that this did not have a push and cut problem or a liberty problem, let's just say that this move works perfectly. Now, how does black deal with his situation? So if black plays here, black may be able to capture white's 1 stone, but that 1 stone still has a lot of annoying things it can do. First of all, now if white even just sacrifices it, like something like this, we can see that this is very over-concentrated because if we just played the Joseki out normally, would black play here next? Absolutely not. This is totally unnecessary. Black has a pretty good connection no matter what white does. Like black can play here, or black can try to connect under first. White needs a lot of outside setup, like a white stone around here, for example, and better yet, some stones around here too, before this move here starts to become powerful later. And that's the reason why some people would choose this version of the Joseki. But that has its own pros and cons, and it's kind of besides the point of this video, so let's move on. So this is actually bad for white in terms of just these exchanges, because what's happening here is, let's just say black tried to play somewhere else now. But now if white ran away with this stone, black would have two weak groups. So when white plays these hane and connection, white is damaging his own stone, his own friend over here, and actually strengthening black by giving black more stones here. Not to mention improving the connection black has to this pincer stone over here. So these exchanges are actually bad for white and not worth the slight gain in the corner unless it was like a certain situation, maybe endgame, and maybe this white stone was already a lost cause. But this is actually like a one step back for two steps forward type of situation. So white makes these exchanges and takes a slight hit in order to get this move, which is like two steps forward. It's just that good. It is just that good of a move that it's worth making those exchanges. And so that's really the real explanation about this. And I say this because I want you to be able to really remember this Joseki without memorizing and without having to re-memorize it over and over. So white invades to take the corner. Black cuts white off, which synergizes with the whole pincer over here to take the right side. So black's basically remaining consistent with the plan of getting the right side. White plays on the third line and as an extension, or a nobi as they say, the Japanese term, in order to get the most points and the most eye space while also increasing liberties. There's no reason to play anything else right now like this. You might survive with other moves, but this not only is the best for white, but it also affects the black stones the most too by reducing black's liberties. So black extends, and white wants to jump out here because the other options are not as good in terms of the results, like being low or being behind black like this. So white makes use of the friend over here, takes a step back with these slightly harmful exchanges, helping black a little bit, but getting to jump out here and stay on the third line. And this is what I would call being ahead of black, because if black tried to push, white would always be one step ahead like this, and eventually white would even be able to safely hane. You can't really hane here. I mean, you could choose to still do it in some situations, but this cut would work for black locally. If white tried to capture, then there would be this Atari followed by this catastrophic destruction of the corner. Like this, or just like this. Or Atari here and hane here. So this would be like game over kind of situation. So yeah, so that's that. By the way, I just want to add this in a lot of Q level games, you see black pushing here. This might even be something that you do, and I want to tell you why it's bad. The only reason you're pushing here is because you want this push over here to be definitely sente, right? You want it so that if white plays elsewhere, you'll be able to play here, and it's a horrible result for white. Yes, however, you don't need that, because just pushing here directly is already sente, because the same thing will happen if white ignores. And white's not going to take it away from you. White's not going to play here. And that's another important Go concept, right? Is if your opponent's not going to take it away from you, maybe you don't need to play it. White's not going to play here because this loses a chance to get out and get ahead of black like this. If white plays here, black has the chance to just start playing hane, and it doesn't make sense for white. White has no reason not to come out like this. So black never actually needed to push here. And by pushing here, there's a few things black loses. First of all, black loses one of his own liberties. And later on, this actually really does matter, because white can activate this stone again later with a move like this and so on, and start a fight. It also, black's having one less liberty also powers up white's move here. It makes it a lot more sente and high pressure. And this could be a really good gain for white on this side. So you don't want that. You also lose co-threats. In case you know what co-threats are, this is a move that white has to answer basically. So and you can play this so that you can then go and take back a co somewhere. And there's some more co-threats, depending on like the situation, you might cut or maybe cut here, but you're losing one or more co-threats when you do moves like this. Another thing you lose is that like if black had a stone here later, then there's actually a little invasion sort of placement here, which could be really good for points as well as attacking white later. Because now white's eye space is not fully secure yet. So you lose a lot of things. You lose a lot more things than you think when you play unnecessary moves. Anyways, yeah. So that'll be it for this Joseki. So I hope you can focus on the concepts of staying ahead of the opponent and as well as liberties. Liberties actually came into play in everything here because we had this push and cut problem that was related to liberties. We had this solution by increasing white's liberties in the corner with these forcing moves and then being able to get ahead like this. And we had the reasons not to do unnecessary exchanges like this push because eventually your loss of liberty, among other things, can come back to haunt you. So that'll be that for now. And yeah, I hope you took something away from this. If you did, please comment down below on what helped you the most from this video. Feel free to add your own comments, questions, suggestions. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe. And I'll see you guys again really soon.